give me a little bit more. Give me a little bit more.
Nebraska's the king of
bad.
buyouts.
Nebraska's never had. Yeah, exactly.
King of buyouts. I think Texas A&M took that when they paid Jimbo Fisher
$100 million.
Yeah, what the fuck it was. Jesus Christ. It made Scott Frost $15 million look real small. Yeah. That was bad. That was real bad. Yeah. That's why I laughed when everybody's like, oh, they're going to have to pay Nebraska $4 million to take Trev. It's like, Jesus Christ. That Jimbo's got that in his couch cushions right now from his buyout.
I'll never forget post-game after the Georgia Southern game. I was like, Scott Frost needs to be gone tomorrow. And
45, 50, 45, 40, 35, 30. He's going to go. Holy cow.
Big Red Junkies.
Day by day, he gets better and better. We get better and better. Team is Oh, man, woman, and child, he just turned this stadium inside out.
This is Elijah Herbal. For those of you who don't know him, we are lucky to have him on tonight. Jed is out, and he is filling in his stead. So we're going to hit him with all the hard questions. I am super excited to have you here because there's a couple things that have happened here recently that I think warrant finding out some opinions from somebody that actually used to work inside the university. Yourself, you worked for Husker Media for a while, didn't you?
yeah, pretty much my entire college experience, which I didn't do it my freshman year, but then I took the super senior year, so a full 4 years. My full college experience.
You didn't use a COVID year?
Well, I went to school during COVID.
He's redshirted, I see.
I went to school during COVID, and during COVID, my academic advisor just quit her job. So I didn't have an academic advisor, so I was taking classes that I did not need because I did not have an advisor that was like, hey, turns out you don't need to take this class. So
Yikes.
I get to the end of, it's the semester before like what was supposed to be my last semester, and I'm looking and I'm like, I think I'd have to take 24 credits to graduate this spring. And I was like, I'm not doing that. No. So I ended up, I was 6 credits away by the time I finished, like all my friends are graduating. I'm 6 credits away. And to be a full-time student, you have to take 12 classes. So I was just taking pointless classes for a semester. I think I finished with,
like
I loved the history courses. I was a history minor. And like looking back on it, if I would have just gone so I said the super senior year, it was more of a semester and I graduated mid-year. And as I look back, I was like a couple classes away from being able to have a history major as well. I was so close. I took like 40 credits of history classes at UNL for no reason.
I don't understand. He's taking the art of the nude body like 4 times. It just doesn't make sense.
He's always front row too.
Yeah. This guy.
He never misses a class.
Just sitting in the front row, beer in hand.
Well, I want to get your take on the Trev stuff. I mean, obviously, I watch your show. I've heard it. But I want to get your like legit take, unfiltered. You can say whatever the fuck you want to on here. What did you think of the Trev move, and then what did you think of the hire?
Okay, well, we'll start with the Trev move because I was like everybody else in that I was surprised, extremely surprised. Whenever like you wake up on a Wednesday morning and you go, oh, it's going to be one of those days. We got this news breaking. Okay, but I had heard for probably 2 months prior to the news. From some people I talked to in the athletic department, that there was a little bit of tension, I guess, between Trev and the Board of Regents. He was unhappy with the fact that without an actual president in charge, he didn't report to the president like was set out under Ted Carter. Under Ted Carter, it was changed so that the president had purview over the athletic department, so Trev essentially reported directly to Ted Carter.
The buffer we talked about.
And then when Ted Carter's out, you have the interim president in. He's no longer reporting to the interim president. He's reporting to the entire Board of Regents.
Sure.
And there was some frustration there, particularly with his stadium expansion project, his baby, if you will, that, you know what, he's got this great idea. Board of Regents doesn't like it. Board of Regents shooting down his funding ideas. He was unhappy. There was some tension going on. I did not think it was to the point that it was like, oh, hey, Trev's going to be looking for a new job. I thought it was a case of, hey, he's going to be frustrated. He's going to be pushing for a president. And as soon as they get a president hired, all these issues are going to be solved. I will say, on that note, I don't think the stresses and the drama are enough that a man of that salary would be like, all right, deuces, I'm out of here. Like, this is just horrible. It's toxic. I don't think it reached that point. Obviously, I wasn't in the AD's chair, so I don't know the full story. I hold that against Trev just a little bit. The fact that when the going got tough he just dipped out. Usually the tough get going when the going gets tough. That's how the saying goes. And that's the type of guy.
Especially the things that he used to talk about, Nebraska work ethic and commitment.
That's the
and
type of guy that we as people that covered Nebraska and people that are Husker fans thought we had in Trev Alberts.
Yeah.
Was a guy that, you know what, despite all the pitfalls and the hurdles that there are at Nebraska right now, Trev was the guy that was going to put his nose to the grindstone and work. And that's why it was so out of character for him just on a Wednesday morning to be like, oh, he's going to Texas A&M now.
But is it really out of his character? It's out of what he talked about.
That's the thing.
It's not out of, if you go look at his background, it's not out of character for him.
He loves burning bridges. Well, what I said on the air.
I don't even know if it's really a burned bridge. It's more of just he made a business move, but you did you douched on mom and dad for your business.
What I said on the air, and again, Hail Varsity Radio, check it out. Free shout out for myself. What I said on the air was Trev has made a habit of going double middle fingers up on his way out the door of any job. He's made a habit of doing
tweeting
it.
Texas A&M shit after, the day after.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a middle finger for sure.
Or there's I'm not sure if you guys have heard this one. Whenever they announced Dennis LeBlanc, apparently Trev Alberts still had his Nebraska email and was trying to reply to some of the movers and shakers in the athletic department, some of the important people, like, hey, congrats to Dennis, this is a great hire. He hits reply all. So the entire athletic department gets an email the next day, like, Trev saying, hey, great hire, really happy for you guys, as he's on the way out, and all the athletic department's like, what the hell's going on here? So he was quickly removed from the email database following that and had to turn to Twitter. But read the room, dude. For some reason, he has just made a habit of being either intentionally or unintentionally. I think like with ESPN intentionally, with UNO unintentionally, but he kind of made his own bed there. And now with Nebraska, it's just double middle fingers up on his way out the door. That's been the Trev Alberts way. And I will say, I still have a ton of respect for Trev Alberts. I think he's great at what he does. I think he's going to be someone who is very important in the landscape of college football 10 to 15 years from now. Maybe that'll pay dividends to Nebraska. Probably not. But I still hold a lot of respect for Trev Alberts. That being said, what he pulled to leave Nebraska still leaves a bad taste in my mouth because it flies in face to what you said. It is in stark contrast to what he said while he was the athletic director. He did not back up what he said with his actions. Leaves a bad taste in my mouth, but at the end of the day, it's on to the next one, and we can get into this if you want. I think Nebraska got a good one, but we can finish up the Trev conversation if you'd like.
They've all heard my opinion on everything, and I think you hit it spot on. He walked there, he talked the talk, he did not walk the walk. And you can look at everything in his career. He's all about his own legacy. He's all about what's the next step. And I don't think Texas A&M is going to get any more time from him than we did. Maybe a year more, but they're a stepping stone. He has higher aspirations. Or you don't make that move if Texas A&M's that's not the dream job. That's not where you want to wind up forever.
No, I think he got his Big Ten rub, and now he wants some SEC rub before he goes to his next spot.
Yep. It just makes sense.
But whenever I look at it, all things considered, if you leave the bad taste in your mouth to the side, Trev Alberts did leave the Nebraska athletic department in a better place than he found it. And I
absolutely agree with the Rhule hire. But if you look at the rest of what he's getting credit for
also,
everybody else being good.
From my time in the athletic department, the athletic department was a bit of a structural mess when I was there. There was not great communication between departments. There was a lot of fat that needed to be trimmed. Not to steal the Trump quote, but drain the swamp, if you will. Some tenured people that weren't necessarily worth their salary. He trimmed the fat. He got some competent people in charge. He definitely got the athletic department moving in the right direction.
Got to fire the fat people. Large Marge. She's not fat. She's pregnant. Sorry. Whenever I can't help myself when I hear the phrase "trim the fat," I'm just got to fire the fat people. We just went through a riff at work, and that's exactly what I said in an open meeting. It was really funny. So it's okay. I can say it because I was the fattest person on the meeting. But anyway, back to what you were saying. It was an organizational nightmare.
Back to business. He really tightened the ship on the Husker Athletics department. From the people I know that were there during my era and then into Trev Alberts' era, they liked the structure of it. Trev Alberts was a demanding boss, but he was personable. People liked him. He left the athletic department in a better place than he found it. You can see the direction of a lot of the football programs. He's a part of the Matt Rhule hire. All good stuff. I think if it was anybody else besides Trev Alberts, the taste that would be left in your mouth would not be as bad. But because it's Trev Alberts, it stings a little bit more. but I think you got to tip your cap to Trev for what he did while he was here. And I hope his entire legacy as a Cornhusker is not tarnished by the way he left Nebraska here. Obviously, it's going to be a stain on the resume, but he was a great football player here. I think during his time as AD, he did a great job being the AD and taking Nebraska to a point where it's still somewhat prominent. That was an athletic department that was spiraling. I don't think it's spiraling right now with the direction a lot of programs are moving. Obviously, football has to make it work, because in the modern era of college athletics, if you don't have a football team, you don't have an athletics program.
No.
It's as simple as that. Football pays the bills. So,
well, if this
rules got to be right.
The excitement that's come back to the program, if they shit the bed again this year, or even shit the bed again next year,
that's why he's
going to be gone in quick order.
I don't want to anoint Trev just yet.
Yeah.
I don't want to anoint Trev as being like, he's a great athletic director. There's still more work that needs to be done.
Jury's still out on whether or not he was a great athletic director, because also the hires that made the rest of the athletic department good happened under Moose. They didn't happen under him. Yes, he retained Hoiberg, but he didn't hire Hoiberg. He didn't hire
Bolt.
Yeah, he didn't make a lot of those moves himself. He just was the one to be here while they all took place and really started going.
But he did well in his CEO role, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I believe that he left the athletic department in a better place than where he found it. Now it's on to Troy Dannen.
I think the biggest thing, and I did not say this on our, I think the largest credit that I will give him is he was a prodigal son, a homegrown kid that was able to come in and say, hey, this other homegrown kid's got to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. He was the right dude to get us away from Frost. But just like I've said about Frost, I still love Scott Frost, the player. He's a fucking horrible coach for us, but I still love him as a player. You got to keep those two things separate. Same with Trev.
Well, think about that. You have to keep his tenure separate from how he left, because there's been, look at how Tom Osborne came into AD. You had the mess of Bill Callahan. You got to hire a football coach. Eichhorst comes in, and we all know his job was to fire Bo Pelini, fix the football program. You have Moose come in. Hey, you got to make the hire. You got to get Frost. Every athletic director walked into a mess of some sort, particularly with the football team, but not just the football team. Troy Dannen's the first that he walks in, and it's like, oh, you ain't got nothing to do right now.
Hands off right now.
You got at least 6 months to settle yourself and get your athletic department figured out, which is a credit to Trev Alberts in his tenure, which I've been able to have a little bit more perspective on as the time's gone on. And again, the bad taste in your mouth subsides a little bit.
What do you think of Troy Dannen? I loved his press conference. I think he actually talks more like a Nebraskan than Trev did, because Trev was so polished, from a media perspective. Troy Dannen does a lot of the, double speak and things like that. And he's got that Iowa, Nebraska, Midwestern way of talking. He also seems very genuine.
Seems genuine. I'll wait and see, because so did Trev.
And 5 months ago, he also told Washington he was going to retire there. So if you're Washington fans, if Trev wasn't a Nebraska player, we would feel the same way about Trev leaving as Washington does right now. I think maybe even Washington might have it a little bit worse. Just because it's 5 months ago, you came in, you hired a great head football coach to replace a great head football coach that just replaced Nick Saban. Jed pointed out he's most likely going to be gone after this year. So if you're Troy Dannen, why are you staying at Washington?
Well, and apparently behind the scenes, he was having issues drumming up the funding that he wanted after DeBoer had left. DeBoer had left, and the money kind of went, we just lost 21 of our starters, or whatever the number is. And
I was going to say they were going to be bad regardless of who the coach was.
Have you guys heard the story? I can't personally confirm it to be true, but I've had enough people that have said, yeah, it's true. The golf course story with Dannon?
He said it was true. He said that at his press conference.
Yeah.
He didn't lay out. He said he was on the golf course. He did not lay out the story as it was told.
Well, okay, yeah, true.
The story as it was told was that he was out with the boosters on the 15th hole. He just dips on out to take a phone call and never comes back. That I can't explicitly confirm, but I believe it to be true.
I don't believe he didn't go back. You got to go back and say, hey, guys, I'm really sorry, but I just took the Nebraska AD job. I'm out of here.
I wouldn't.
You can't not go back out
there. They're no longer your boosters.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, God.
I'm not going back out there.
Here's the
I don't want to be. I'm going to the bar.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to celebrate.
That's one thing I haven't looked up yet, was what kind of a pay raise he took to come down here, or what his salary looks like to what Trev's did when he left.
The only contract stuff I heard about was how much his buyout would be if he wanted to leave in the first year.
What was
12
that?
million.
12 million.
Jesus.
And at any point after that, it's like 8 million.
Yeah, it gets like progressively
Think they-
lower, but it's
think they
still
learned
a
their lesson on
chunk.
Trev?
Yeah.
If you don't think Dannon was the guy that wanted to be here, I've heard a lot of people say, well, it's about the money, or he just wants to be closer to home. That's why he left Washington. Look at his contract. Obviously, he's getting a raise, but no one signs a contract with a $12 million first-year buyout and a giant buyout after that if it's not like something they really want to do.
Yeah.
Because that is going to scare off any other athletic department from hiring him while his contract is still standing. He knows that. That's him saying, I'm locked in for Nebraska, which I think is a big positive. Obviously, you can say it, but whenever it's in your contract that, like, hey, not many schools around the country have the financial means to take you from us. I think that says a lot about Dannon and his willingness to be here and to make it work. And it also speaks to what Nebraska is. I mean, think about it. He's essentially saying Nebraska is a better place to be right now than a team that was in the college football playoff last season.
Yeah.
And he's not wrong. I think you can look at it. I mean, Washington is in disarray following the college football playoff with their head coach leaving, any player worth a damn transferring to Alabama. They're in disarray. I think Fish is going to do a good job.
The whole top half of the recruiting class.
Don't get me wrong. I think Fish is going to do a good job, but that's a mess.
But I
That's
think
a
he's only
mess.
there.
He's got his work cut out
Jed
for him.
made a great point that he's only there for 1 year. Because what's his name's going to get fired down at Florida probably mid-season, and that's his dream job. That's where he's going to be.
We'll see about that. I think Fish has, with what he did at Arizona, he's got some ties on the West Coast now. I wouldn't be surprised if he could do better than people expect there. Maybe he sticks around. I'm not a Washington expert, so I'm not going to speak on it. But I will say with Troy Dannen, that's a guy, we've seen it in all the stops. He's a football guy. He cares about football beyond anything else. So really at the end of the day, it's about where's Nebraska football at compared to where Washington's at. And with this move, he's essentially saying, I believe more in the next 5 years of Husker football than I believe the team that was in the college football playoff last season.
It's a wild statement to make on a 5-7 team.
It's wild, but I don't think it's misplaced. If you look at it with no context, it's a wild thing to say. But you look at it with context, with what happened with Washington.
Yeah, with the amount of abuse that just went through Washington.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not that crazy.
I'm with you on that.
I think Nebraska got a guy who's a football guy. I mean, really drummed up a lot of funding for Tulane's football program, built them up to a place where they could beat USC in the Cotton
I was going
Bowl.
to say they made him competitive.
I mean, he made a great hire. He really supported that football team. And you can see the results. And it's the modern era of college athletics. Whenever he got that football team rolling, the entire athletic department prospered.
Yeah.
He was if you're able to get funding for the football program, hey, you can get funding for basketball, for baseball. They added a sailing team, for crying out loud. Who the hell's adding a sailing team in 2020? But he was at
You got
Tulane.
the golf right there.
I mean, he added a sailing team because he was able to drum up support among the boosters based on the buzz of his football program at Tulane. He understands that. He understands that in the modern era of college athletics, as I said earlier, if you don't have football, you don't have an athletic program.
Yeah.
He got the football program right at Tulane. The entire athletic department benefited. You could say the same about Washington for his 5 months there. When the football team was good, they were prospering, and then everything fell apart with the football team. The funding fell apart. He's like, I got to get out of here. But he comes to Nebraska, a place where his job is going to be get the football team right, get the funding right from the boosters of substance, and you're going to be set. It's as simple as that. That's his job coming in here, is come get the football team right, be a fullback for Matt Rhule. If you can do that, if you can set Matt Rhule and the football team up for success among the entire athletic department will follow. That's what his job is.
Did you make anything of Rhule in his first press conference right after the Trev news, before the Dannon hire, and then in the little 5-minute blip that he gave on the sideline at Pro Day? In both of those instances, he was asked about the South Stadium project, and both times he declined talking about that, but made an emphasis to say, but I'd really like to have our, facilities project complete. Like, I'd really like to get on this. Did you make anything of that? Do you think there was any tension there in the fact that that wasn't Trev's baby and he didn't really care about getting it completed and it seemed to just drag on?
I wouldn't say that Trev was not caring about getting it completed. I think it speaks a little bit more to the fatigue among the donors.
Sure.
That, oh, hey, we just built this shiny new $100 million sports training or football training facility for you. It's not done yet, but we're almost there. And now you want a $450 million stadium project, which I think just about everybody knows that was going to cost way more than $450 million. And it wasn't just going to take one football season. It was a project that was large in scope. And I think whenever you say, hey, thanks for all your money on this football facility. We're 5% away from getting all the funding done. And hey, guess what? We got another one coming down the road for you.
That's twice the size.
I think
all after your head football coach got up on the podium at the end of last season and said, hey, I need a couple mil so I can go get a quarterback.
There's definite donor fatigue. And I think that's more what Matt Rhule, if you're reading in between the lines with him, is saying is just like, let's focus on getting this done first. Yeah. Let's get this stuff done that directly benefits the football program, and the football stadium will take care of itself. The concern being 5 years from now, in an era of college football where there's revenue sharing and there's a quote-unquote salary cap and the athletic department's directly paying the student athletes, which we're headed that way, is there still going to be enough money to go around for the university and the athletic department to put in its chunk on the stadium, or is it going to become financially even less feasible 5 years from now? That's the only question to me right now with the stadium expansion, because everything else tells me the timing is not right.
I don't think the timing is right, A, but B, I struggle with, I think a lot of people struggle with the price tag. Mm-hmm. They have a hard time at times, and at least I've heard this the last 2 seasons, they've had a hard time making sure that all the suites were full. And you want to add another 40 or 60 suites, whatever that was, across the entire South End. And I understand structurally, like, it was going to be gorgeous. The renderings that ironically came up hours after Trev.
Not a coincidence.
That wasn't random?
I just someone be like, oh, it turns out this work I spent 3 months on is never coming to light.
I'm dropping this shit. Let's go.
Yeah. Mass email to every reporter in Nebraska.
Yeah, no shit. Well, the Husker Facebook page put it up first. But, you look at it and you say, okay, you can't tell me that South End Zone project, which, yes, it's a massive project, but that had a price tag of less than $100 million less than what the new largest building in the state of Nebraska that's going in downtown Omaha is going to have, the new Mutual Omaha building. It's like, because I think the final number that I thought I saw on the South Stadium project was going to be like 520, and the Mutual Omaha building is set for 600.
Jeez.
But the fuck are you telling me? You're going to have a skyscraper in downtown Omaha that's going to cost basically the same as a quarter of our stadium in Lincoln? Come on now.
Trev picked the lowest bid, but it was the lowest bid by a concerning amount. We'll just say that. Honestly, if
they want to turn South Stadium into, the wraparound concourse, they want that whole thing. Do it like Minnesota has their end zone. Go halfway up. Do it like the outfield at TD or at Charles Schwab. Just put a platform on the backside of what's already there. You can connect everything that way. You don't have. Yes, there needs to be renovation, and there's a lot of talk about the ADA stuff. There is more than enough ADA seating in that stadium. They don't have to be worried about that shit.
The problem with just trying to do a renovation is you have a stadium that has been cobbled together over the course of 100 years, where you're dealing with construction here from 1955, and here it's from 1974, and this is the construction we did in 94 whenever the South Stadium collapsed a little bit. You are dealing with a mishmash of issues. The simple way to do it is to tear it all down. And rebuild from the start, but it's not a feasible time to do that. The question to me is, like, if you put a Band-Aid on it and just do some small renovations for now, are you just running into a place where you're going to waste money because 15 years from now you're going to need to do the full rebuild? That's what I worry about with the stadium expansion. But you hit the nail on the head. $450 million was not going to cover a South Stadium rebuild.
It's just not necessary. That type of that size, and you also have you essentially hit a roadblock of, look, we got to get Frost out of here, and we got to get a coach in here that's going to get the fan base excited again, because we are literally giving away tickets to unfortunate children so that we can keep this fucking sellout streak alive. And let's go ahead now that football's in a fever pitch and everybody's the most excited they've been in almost 2 decades about it. Let's go ahead and take away a third of the seats or a quarter of the seats.
That's what's funny. Say that Trev, whenever he introduced this, didn't even know how many seats it was going to, because they were not far enough along in the plan to announce what they wanted to do. They didn't even have the renderings done. The renderings, if you remember, were from a mile high and didn't even show the South Stadium. It was just like a block-looking stadium. Like, this is where it's going to be. This isn't what it's going to look like.
Just a red outline.
Yeah. How many seats do we lose? I'm not quite sure. We're going to have a wraparound concourse, hopefully. Like, that's why I think everyone is so convinced that it wasn't going to cost $450 million, because you didn't even have a plan. You got a bid without a real plan. And it's as simple as that. I mean, Trev, I think is on the money in that there is something that needs to be done with that South Stadium. A, to improve it, to modernize it. You want to get the student section a little bit closer to the field.
Yes.
That's important. I do think lowering the capacity in the era we're in now with everything being on national television, yeah, it makes a little bit of sense. There's going to be a percentage of fans that no longer want to come to the game if they can sit in the comfort of their own home and watch it.
I don't hate lowering the capacity to...
No, he's on the money, and it's very important
75.
to get out some of the grandfathering costs of people who've had their seats since 1945.
Yep.
And they're still paying that same or similar rate that they were back then. You got to get that out. At the end of the day, though, this is not the time. There's other ways you can go about accomplishing those things, or there's a time you can do it somewhere down the road. Now is not the time with the cost cutting you're seeing on the academic side for Nebraska. It's not a good look to go do that for the football stadium. A conservative governor in charge who is trying to limit costs within the state as a whole. It's not a good look if he then goes and improves this project. It's not a good look after you've already built this shiny new football facility. The timing was just not right. I don't think it's the sole reason why Trev left, but I think it's a big part of it because that was going to be his legacy at Nebraska.
Legacy. Call it a vanity play if you want. That is what it is.
It was needed. He saw that was needed, and I think now looking back, that maybe should have been the writing on the wall that Trev had bigger aspirations in Nebraska, and he saw us as a stepping stone, was like, I'm going to try to force through my legacy. I'm going to force through the Trev Alberts South Stadium expansion or renovation, whatever you want to call it.
But so I can say I did that.
Yeah. Now I look back and I go, oh, that totally seems like a piece that you can put on your resume whenever you're looking for your next job.
Exactly.
Well, now you can see it with some clarity.
That was something that Severe mentioned on the radio, whatever that was, that Thursday or Wednesday, whatever it was. He talked about how Trev had just been, the week before, he had just been in Omaha with somebody, I can't remember who it was for sure, but was taking a tour of UNO's campus. And all he wanted to do was point out all the things he did while he was there. And, oh, look, I built that building. And, oh, look, I did that. And, oh, look, I did that.
Oh, there's the demolished wrestling building.
Yeah, there's a football stadium that's now a soccer stadium and doesn't have any use. And yeah, I don't know. I'm over it though. I like Troy Dannen. Kind of like what Jed talks about. Most people don't know who the athletic director is. They know who the football coach is. We knew the athletic director a lot better here because he's been talked about a lot over the past 2 decades, firing and hiring coaches. And we've had some fuck ups. Now everybody's mad at Trev, and people 6 months from now probably won't know who Troy Dannen is.
It's still Nebraska. That being said, we had our Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio, which is a lot of fun every single week. And Gary Sharp
Jump on, it's fun.
Gary Sharp hopped on the Saturday morning show last week and was like, does anybody in the country talk about the athletic director as much as Nebraska? And I had to sit back and think. And I went, that's a really good point.
I highly doubt it.
That's a really good point. You heard about Gene Smith at Ohio State, but that's because he was kind of angling for bigger and better things. Mm-hmm. So that kind of makes sense. You heard about Getz at Iowa this year. That's just because she fired Brian Ferentz after years of the fans calling for it. Like when an athletic director does something notable,
Dad's the head coach.
They're in the news cycle for like a week or two.
But I couldn't have told you her name. If you asked me right now, right before you said that, I couldn't have told you her name.
I just know it because I mispronounced it on the air, and an Iowa fan called in to correct me, and I went, So
if there's any Iowa fan listening, I also wouldn't have known that Iowa had a female athletic director. So go fuck yourself if you're watching.
She's on that note. But no, he's got a great point. Nobody talks about the athletic director as much as Nebraska. I don't think Troy Dannen's going to fall out of the news cycle magically. No. But I do think he is going to be a little bit more behind the scenes than Trev was.
Sure.
He's going to be much more about...
Trev liked the spotlight. He liked the spotlight.
Oh, Trev was about him.
He was making sure he was getting photo ops every time Dylan Raiola was in town before he was recruited, all those things.
Courtside seats.
Yeah.
They had a real CEO, like even CEOs of corporate. Why is Greg Marcus on my movie screen before movies? It's because
he's got a little vanity in him.
There's a little vanity. Yeah. CEOs like being seen, and Trev was a guy that I think liked being seen. There's nothing wrong with that. That is one style of administration, and you know what? It works. The people in Nebraska love Trev whenever he was doing that. Whenever you go, it's going to make people hate you. I don't think Troy Dannen is cut from that same mold.
Seems humble.
More of a fan running things than a CEO, if that makes sense. I think he is going to be the biggest cheerleader for coaches and players in the athletic department. He's going to be a cheerleader for them with NIL groups, with donors. It's a very important role to have. It's important to drum up support, especially at a time where it appears that the Husker football team is trending upwards, it's important to have somebody in your corner saying, no, we have the guys in place. This is awesome.
Yeah, we're doing this.
I am rooting for these guys just as hard as you are. Now show me the dollar bills. Like it's important to have that role. Dannon is going to be stylistically a different athletic director than Trev. But at the end of the day, it's still Nebraska. We are still some of the most psychotic people in the country when it comes to college sports.
There's a reason
there's no pro teams around here.
Husker podcasts.
We're still going to be talking about the athletic director, but I don't think it'll be as much as what it was under Trev or under Moose or under Eichhorst. 3 guys. Eichhorst maybe the least amount, but he had the most to do. But 3 guys that I think liked to be seen, liked to be CEOs, liked to be in the spotlight.
Yeah,
Dannon is not that same type.
I still don't think as many people as are mad at Trev, I don't think he rises to the level of Peterson yet. So unless something crazy goes off, the things that I don't really understand, this is actually something I was going to ask you a couple rapid fire questions that aren't necessarily Husker football, but one of them was extending Hoiberg. I realize that wasn't Trev, but doesn't this seem premature?
No.
No? You don't think so?
No.
You gave me 1 year after it's been shit.
No. It's this to me.
You made him the 6th highest paid coach in the country.
Does Fred deserve to be the 6th highest paid coach in the country based on the totality of what he's done at Nebraska? No.
As we're watching Creighton in the Sweet 16.
Would somebody out there be willing to
pay him? Yeah.
Him a top 10 coach in the country based on what he put on paper on the court this season? I believe that to be yes. Do you think that Fred Hoiberg has this program going in the right direction?
I don't know. I think he relies on the transfer portal too much, but I also think you saw it this year in college basketball a lot more than you even saw it yet in college football. NIL and the transfer portal is affecting college basketball and the parity in college basketball more than any other sport.
You have to, right? Look at Kentucky. Why does Kentucky bow out every single year? Because they're trying to make their roster with 4 freshmen and 1 junior.
Yeah.
Like, that's what Kentucky does. And it's not working anymore.
Well, it's also why they came out and said, we're putting together a basketball NIL, and we're going to become the NIL mecca of college basketball.
The transfer portal is how you have to get old and stay old in college basketball. I mean, I think we're going to see a change in how high-level high school basketball players go to the NBA, because it used to be the one and done. I think we're nearing the end of the one and done era in college basketball with guys' options to go.
NIL?
They go play in the G League.
I was gonna say they don't have to go to college anymore. They just go to the G League and
go play in the G League. I mean, you can go play internationally for you. We've seen guys go to New Zealand and Australia. These top level guys
and make good money for that year.
Yes.
Does it make sense for you to go be the 6th man on a team full of super senior graduate players that have all transferred into whatever blue blood you're going to? Not necessarily. I mean, I still think
like what Kansas looked like this year.
Yes,
little top heavy roster with maybe 6 or 7 deep, and the rest of it's shit.
That's exactly what I think college football or college basketball is going to start looking like. I'm not as much of a college basketball expert as I am college football, but you can just see the effect. We got Creighton pulled up on TV here on Friday night.
Go Tennessee.
Creighton's an old team. Creighton's gotten old and stayed old. Tennessee is the same way. They have veterans on that roster. Like, so many teams that you see making deep runs in March Madness are making deep runs because they have experience, they have veteran leadership, they have guys that have played 4 years of college basketball. Like, is Zach Edey going to go set the world on fire in the NBA? No, but he is bar none the best player in college basketball this season.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I think we're reaching a point of it. It's not going to make sense for high school, high-level guys that want to be playing in the NBA by the time they're 19. It's not going to make sense for them to go play college basketball anymore. And with that in mind, I think Fred's strategy of using the transfer portal, it's what you got to do in college basketball now. It's what you got to do. It's what everybody else is doing. I don't think he relies too much upon the transfer portal. I do think, though, that he has found a method, a strategy, a type of guy, a mold that works in the Big Ten. Obviously, I'm curious to see what he can do next year. He's assuming returning a lot of talent. We haven't heard of key departures, guys that were in the starting lineup that aren't seniors. I assume those guys are sticking around. You have some pieces to build upon. You have an NCAA tournament run to build upon. Obviously, you got to put your money where your mouth is next year. You got to make another run. You got to be in the NCAA tournament next season as well.
Got to follow it up.
But I think it's pretty universally accepted that Fred has this program going in the right direction. I think somebody out there would have been willing to pay Trev a lot of money.
You really think
Ohio
so?
State, A lot of
I can see Ohio
programs.
State doing it.
Michigan.
They were fucking bad this year.
If Fred was more available, would Indiana look at firing Woodson and bringing in Hoiberg?
Oof.
He's got ties to that region.
Shocking.
I know it's Minnesota, but Minnesota's pretty close to Indiana. He's got some ties up there.
Indiana, that's with Woodson. You think about how far his star has fallen. That motherfucker was NBA Finals head coach, and now he's about to get laid off.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Mike Woodson seemed like a slam dunk hire. So you have to ask yourself, can Nebraska currently get somebody who is better than Fred Hoiberg?
No.
Would somebody else in the country be willing to make Fred Hoiberg a top 10 paid coach in America? I believe so. If not top 10, top 15. I think somebody would have been willing to pay that price.
We were.
Therefore, at a place like Nebraska, where let's look at the media rights payouts that Nebraska gets, Nebraska can afford to pay Fred that money.
I'm not that worried about the money. I was more worried about us locking him up long term.
I'm not concerned
just
about that.
because it just seemed like, okay, cool, you got one good year. This is a feel good year. Give me a little bit more. Give me a little bit more.
Nebraska's the king of buyouts.
Nebraska's never had. Yeah, exactly.
King of buyouts. I think Texas A&M took that when they paid Jimbo Fisher
$100 million.
Yeah, what the fuck it was. Jesus Christ. It made Scott Frost $15 million look real small. Yeah. That was bad. That was real bad. Yeah. That's why I laughed when everybody's like, oh, they're going to have to pay Nebraska $4 million to take Trev. It's like, Jesus Christ. That Jimbo's got that in his couch cushions right now from his buyout.
I'll never forget post game after the Georgia Southern game. I was like, Scott Frost needs to be gone tomorrow. And everyone's like, but the buyout in 2 weeks drops to $7.5 million. I'm like, you will pay that $7.5 million to avoid the national embarrassment of running Scott Frost back out there against Oklahoma on Big Noon kickoff next week. People forgot about that timeline. Nebraska got killed by Oklahoma. Don't get me wrong. But it would have been more of a national embarrassment if you just lost to Georgia Southern and Scott Frost runs out there for another week against Oklahoma. You'll gladly pay that $7.5 million to avoid that national embarrassment and get that out of the way. We're going back a long time ago to things that don't matter anymore. But I was so fully on board with paying that $15 million. And then the next morning, I wake up to his text from Schmitty. Hey, we might be doing a reaction show here soon. Stay posted. Then, 10 minutes later, Frost is out, and I'm doing a reaction show from my basement talking about Scott Frost getting fired. But that's a long aside for just saying Nebraska can afford to pay buyouts if necessary.
And hopefully they don't have to.
And I think it was important to lock up Hoiberg with the money, with the time frame, with everything, because if you didn't do it, I think somebody else would have.
That's fair.
And would you have been able to replace him with anybody with a better resume, simply put, a better basketball coach than Fred Hoiberg? I don't believe so.
No, you're probably right about that. I'm replacing him for sure. I agree with that 100%. I thought that it was a reach when we got him in the first place, and we were lucky that he had failed so miserably in the NBA.
Yep. He's also just a guy that I think loves the city of Lincoln, loves being in Nebraska. I think he seems like that. He feels at home.
Didn't his dad coach here? Coach or play here?
His dad coached at Nebraska. His grandpa was a professor at the university.
Okay.
I
knew he had a lot of family ties. Like I told you, I'm not a big basketball guy.
He was born in Lincoln, if I remember correctly.
Sounds right.
I think he kind of pulled the old Lane Kiffin, where he was born in Lincoln, but was only spent his infancy here before he moved elsewhere, if I remember correctly. But I do believe Nebraska.
It's like Gerald Ford.
Nebraska is home. Hey, Gerald Ford's a Nebraskan through and through.
And this may be the most unbelievable night in Cornhusker football history.